So today we're continuing on with our NHL off-season plan series. We're now at the third-ranked team in the NHL's regular season standings, the Carolina Hurricanes. They had another great regular season, some more playoff success, but still had a hard time getting over that hump to go deeper into playoffs. What do they need to do this offseason to get over that hump? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're exploring the Carolina Hurricanes offseason and discussing what we think they're going to end up doing to try to make the next step here in the progression of their team towards hopefully a Stanley Cup sometime in the next few years. First up, we're going to review their 21-22 season, take a look at some team and individual stats. We're going to explore their salary cap situation to see what they're working with. And then we're going to look at the expiring contracts, who needs to be either re-signed or replaced. And then we're going to look at the top burning questions facing this franchise. What are their biggest objectives they really need to address this summer? So now let's get started with the 21-22 Carolina Hurricanes season in review. So they had an excellent regular season, first in their division in a very tough metro. Like I said, number 3 overall in the entire NHL. 54-20-8 for their record for 116 points. So really solid. The goal scored was pretty good, 9th in the league at 277. They were the top defensive team, only allowing 200 goals. So that's number 1. The power play was 13th, but still very respectable at 22%. And the PK, along with the goals for, the best as well at 88% for number 1. So they have, the top goals against in PK. So overall, your top defensive team is just simply amazing. They don't give up much. So certainly, if you can see an area of opportunity here, it's pretty glaring. If they can maintain, even if it's not first in the league, but in that top few spots, and they can figure out a way to score some more goals, that would probably be what they're missing. That's the missing ingredient here. But of course, we saw a brand new goalie tandem this year between Freddie Andersen and Antti Raanta. Obviously, Raanta and Andersen both played well. Of course, Freddie Andersen, unfortunately, still suffered a fairly significant injury and missed a bunch of time here. Of course, Raanta got hurt at the end of the playoffs as well. So we'll see both goalies enter next year on expiring deals, which we'll discuss here in an upcoming segment. Individually, we saw Sebastian Aho lead with 81 points. Svechnikov had 30 goals. The project, you could say, of Tony DeAngelo put up 51 points on a one-year cheap contract after his awkward exodus from the New York Rangers organization, but he seemed to fit well in Carolina, had a good season, kept everything in check off the ice. So to me, that's a pretty successful year and a good pickup for Carolina. Seth Jarvis had a pretty substantial, rookie campaign as well. Kept really getting more and more ice time, working his way up in the lineup, put up 17 goals and 40 points, and was a very valuable piece in the offensive drive there for Rod Brind'Amour. So lots of good things happening. But like I said, when you look at the team stats and their individuals, really good team. And they do have some all-star quality players, but I think they're just missing that elite level goal scorer. We hope that Andrei Svechnikov, I would think that right now 30 goals is really good, don't get me wrong, but I think he's capable of more too. If you get Andrei Svechnikov moving his way up as he gets a little older, more mature, and continues to evolve, maybe he becomes a 40-goal scorer down the road. He adds something else, and it could greatly change this team. But before we get into what we're going to see in the offseason, let's first explore their salary cap situation. Now, courtesy of CapFriendly.com here, we have a situation where they have 14 contracts on the books already for next year for a total of $63.12 million. That leaves them $19.3 million available. That sounds like a ton of money, but they do have a fair bit of contracts that are expired. That means, 14 contracts on the books. You're looking at signing, 7 to 9 players. So really, when you break it down like that, it's not a ton of money, and they're going to have to spend wisely and appropriately here. So let's now take a look at the expiring contracts. Who needs a new deal or could possibly be traded or replaced here as they have all these expiring contracts? First up on the RFA side of things, you got Steven Lawrence, Marty Necas, Ethan Bear, and Tony DeAngelo. Now, of course, I think all of these players would at least receive a qualifying offer. I don't see a glaring situation where the Hurricanes would be like, no, we don't want this player anymore. We're not going to qualify them at all. I think they were all good enough to get that. That's for sure. Whether or not they're all back, though, might be a different story, right? Obviously, there is a debate here on the future of some of these guys. Tony DeAngelo, of course, is going to become more expensive again like he was before. And these other guys, well, like I said, it's debatable what their new deals will look like, but they could all possibly still be a member of the Hurricanes next year, and they'll definitely all get qualifying offers. I have no doubt on that. On the UFA side of things, they have some tough decisions to make. You've got Vincent Trocheck, who's been a pretty decent number 2 center since they acquired him from Florida. You've got Nino Niederreiter, Max Domi, Derek Stepan, Ian Cole, and Brendan Smith on the blue line. So it's a tough decision here. Like, will all these UFAs be back? Probably not. I can see a scenario where Stepan most likely doesn't come back. With Ian Cole and Brendan Smith, I mean, I see the need of them because they are a unique, different kind of defenseman than they have elsewhere on the roster. They are obviously a little bit more experienced, a little bit more toughness and grit, that sandpaper type of D. So you do need some of that. But obviously, like, if you look at keeping both of them around could, cut down on playing time for a guy like Ethan Bear. So they have to have some decisions that way. We'll see. I don't know that they'd both be back, but I wouldn't be shocked if one of them was. Trocheck and Niederreiter, that's a tough call. I wouldn't rule out the possibility that they do re-sign, but it's going to be tricky. Like I said, with what the Carolina Hurricanes feel they need, with what they have here, I don't know. Max Domi did contribute decently after he's picked up at the deadline. I don't know if they see him as a part of the future. That's debatable too. But now let's jump into the top burning questions facing this franchise, the top priorities. As I mentioned here, top question number 1, and the biggest thing is they need to figure out a way to address scoring. So they need a higher, more elite level scoring winger to be added to this mix. So, like I said, maybe that means that Nino Niederreiter doesn't come back. He's making over $5 million. I don't know what he's going to want in his next deal, but if you look at the stats and where he fits in, you know what? Maybe you keep him for the right price, but maybe you try to upgrade, and maybe he's the guy that doesn't return in order to sacrifice to get that done. I mean, certainly, Rod Brindamore said in the playoffs, at the end of the day, they really had trouble scoring. When they got to round number 2, that's really where they fell short. Is they needed another game breaker like Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov. They're really, really good players, but they're not, in the top 30 scoring leaders of the league. Like Aho being their leading scorer at 81. Look at all the guys that had 100 points this year, or even in the 90s. Like, that extra 10, 15 points can make a big difference. Like, they're really, really good players, and I think they're going to continue to get better. I don't know that they've necessarily peaked yet, and certainly in the case of Svechnikov especially. But if they had another winger that was able to produce 30 to 40 goals, that would be tremendous. Now, of course, they don't grow on trees. They're not easy to find. I don't think there's going to be a ton in free agency that would be intriguing for them to look at. There could be some RFAs that might be available that would need a new contract. I don't know who this player is, but to me, if you look at the overall, that, on a regular season basis, they really wouldn't need to do much. Like, you could go status quo here and kind of run it back and probably have a really, really good regular season again. But when it came down to the nitty-gritty in the playoffs, that's what they were missing. They needed another game breaker. And Seth Jarvis is going to continue to get better. Svechnikov will continue to get better. So it's not like you don't need to blow anything up. You just need to maybe change that mix a little bit. It's debatable if Trocheck and Niederreiter return. Maybe you try to find another player it's a little bit more dynamic, but at the same time, those are some big holes that you have to be careful with. So it's debatable, right? Like, Vinny Trocheck, to me, is probably big question number 2. Like, to me, Niederreiter, and Niederreiter upgrades, if you will. So, like, if his contract goes out, you use that money to spend on, a higher level quality score. That's question 1. Question 2, though, is do you bring back Trocheck as number 2 center? He's going to turn 29 in July. He's probably going to want a longer-term deal. This might be his last opportunity to really cash in. He's had some good seasons there. I don't know what he's going to want for money. If the price is right and you don't get tied into too much term, then I can see them maybe working something out for him to stay. But the problem is if you don't sign him, then what do you do, right? So if you have to have an opportunity to upgrade and find somebody who's maybe a little bit more offensive, you maybe take that opportunity, but again, that's not going to be easy to do. So it's really tough on making some decisions there. I don't know that you need to move on from Trocheck and Niederreiter. It is possible that they don't return, but The center position to me would be a little harder to fill. If they can get Trocheck for the right price and manage to squeeze in another winger that's a good scorer too, to me would be a potential way to go here. Another big question that came up right at the end of the year, which we didn't even hear about until they were done and beat out of the playoffs, was Jake Gardiner. Apparently, Jake Gardiner is cleared and ready to play hockey. He's not going to be eligible for LTIR anymore, so he didn't play this year, and he barely played last year. He signed a 4-year contract with the Carolina Hurricanes as a UFA like 3 years ago, played 1 season, which was probably one of the worst of his career, was not good. And then early into season 2, he gets injured, and he really hasn't played since. So he's missed the better part of like a year and a half, a year and 3/4. Like, it's quite substantial. So how good is he going to be? Will he play? Will Carolina look to move him? But all of a sudden, that is money that's on the books now. So that could obviously probably be much better served elsewhere. I think they've probably mentally moved on from Jake Gardiner, so to find out that he can play, I don't know what that means. Like, what does that mean for their decor? Are they going to consider a buyout, a trade? I just don't know that he fits there. So that is something that they have to figure out. Goaltending is also a question mark here too. Obviously, when it came down to it here in the playoffs, they ran into some injuries. They have 2 quality goaltenders in Ranta and Anderson. Like I said before, Freddie Anderson had a really good year. But the knock on both of these guys throughout especially the last few years of their career, is that they seem to get hurt a lot, and they miss time at the most opportune time. They both have 1-year contracts left on their deals. They both signed 2-year contracts a year ago, so we're halfway through now. Carolina probably should make a decision on trying to decide, are they interested in extending either guy? I would say that, maybe Freddie Anderson probably would have the better chance of getting an extension. Not to say that they couldn't consider extending both of them. If you look at their youth and the goalie prospects, I mean, you've seen Peter Kochetkov come up, but he was so new to North America. He definitely needs another year just to probably play solid hockey in the minors to really be, ready to have any chance at the NHL. I'm not even sure that would be enough time, but it could be. So, it's hard to make a decision on where things are going to be at, maybe more than a year down the road. But considering that if you look around the NHL, I don't know if they're going to have a ton of options here. The problem is they have 2 goalies that are good, but they're prone to injuries, and they're both, into their 30s now. So it's not like they're going to be done anytime soon, but it's really hard to predict. So I think they need to take a look here just to stabilize the position from a cap perspective would be good. I don't know that they'd extend both, but they have to make a decision on that since they're both eligible. I would think they'd want to get ahead of it and try to figure out what the next, not just the coming year, but at least a year after that it's going to look like, or more on the goaltending side of things. I think overall they were happy with Freddie Anderson, but like I said, he keeps getting hurt at the worst opportunity. So hopefully that doesn't happen again, but it's hard to say that it won't. But certainly some tough decisions for a team that was ranked so high in the league. Can they add some more scoring? Can they decide on, the number 2 center spot? Is it Vinny Trocheck at a good price, or is it somebody else? I know both sides said all the right things about being interested in a reunion, but of course that's going to depend on the price tag once negotiations kick off. And what do you do with Jake Gardiner? That's a big one for me. I don't know how they handle that one, because I just don't see him fitting there after such a long layoff. But let me know what you think on the Carolina Hurricanes. Who is the ideal top scorer, like the game-breaking scoring winger that they could try to add that would make sense for them this offseason? I know we've heard a lot about David Pastrnak in the trade rumor mill. I don't think that would be, something that would be realistic just yet, and it would cost a huge price tag. So something like that would be really tough. Maybe a guy like Patrick Laine. Of course, they have a lot of Finns there. We don't know if he's signing long-term in Columbus or what his status is there. Could he maybe be a guy that they consider? Clearly he's a former 40-goal guy. If he can regain that form with what they already have there, that very well could be a nice find too. But at the same time, so we don't know what his status is either. But just a couple of examples of the type of player that they certainly need to try to find and see how they make out. Let me know your thoughts on the Hurricanes offseason and what you expect to see from them, and we'll discuss further down in the comments. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.